commemorative speech.
What are we commemorating?
Okay. As fireworks light the sky this next week on 4th of July, we'll be celebrating with barbecues, flags, and family. But few may stop to think about the man whose pen sparked the very reason for this celebration. Thomas Jefferson didn't just dream of freedom. With a stroke of his quill, he gave voice to a revolution and set the course for our nation. Right now, we're living through a time of deep political division, misinformation, and threats to personal freedom. With the anniversary of his death drawing near, and in this time of deep political and social change, we can honor Thomas Jefferson by not just remembering his words, but by living by his values. As we reflect on Thomas Jefferson's legacy on this upcoming holiday, we must do more than admire his accomplishments. We should ask ourselves, what would he expect of us today? By confronting injustices honestly, defending liberty for all, and committing ourselves to building a more just and inclusive society, much like he did, we can better understand our duty in modern America. I implore you to consider the health of our democracy, the role of truth and knowledge, and what it means to be a citizen in a divided nation. We can find inspiration and direction for the work that still needs to be done. The Declaration of Independence, written by Thomas Jefferson, declared that all men are created equal, laying the foundation for the vision of justice and human dignity that continues to drive us. Thomas Jefferson had a long political background, writing the first draft of the Declaration of Independence when he was appointed to the Committee of Five in 1776, closer to the beginning of his experience. He started his career in public service, diplomacy, and political leadership in 1769 as a member of the Virginia House of Burgesses in the colonial legislature. During his time there, he was known for his stance against taxation without representation. From 1779 to 1781, he was the governor of Virginia, and from 1785 to 1789, he was the minister to France. He became the first U.S. Secretary of State in 1790 until 1793. Soon after, from 1797 to 1801, he was the vice president, working under his political rival, John Adams. And then he became the third president of the United States, running from 1801 to 1809. Throughout his political career, he paved the way for the United States to become one of the greatest nations in the world. When he drafted the Declaration of Independence, he initially included a strongly worded paragraph calling slavery a moral depravity and blaming the King of England for encouraging the slave trade. Though his early efforts to condemn the slave trade were removed by Congress before the final draft was published and signed, his intentions show his commitment to justice and human rights. In 1821, Thomas Jefferson wrote in a letter to Henry Lee, "The Declaration of Independence was intended to be an expression of the mind of the American mind. The Declaration of Independence was supposed to reflect the shared beliefs of American colonies and was designed to live on, growing with each generation. Now that his words have reached our generation, they still hold true, especially in a time where gender equality, racial issues, and LGBTQ+ rights are still proving to be an issue. All men being created equal is still something that Americans have a hard time believing, and that disbelief is being perpetuated and spread within our current government." Jefferson believed that education and the pursuit of truth were essential to protecting liberty and maintaining a strong democracy. He believed that freedom could not exist without an educated and informed public. In 1819, Jefferson established the University of Virginia. He designed the campus, wrote the curriculum, and emphasized secular education, free from religious control. In modern times, there are still debates and politicians trying to pass laws about making the Bible mandatory in public schools. Schools are being restricted on a federal level, being defunded for teaching certain subjects. Jefferson saw public education as a safeguard for democracy, not as a privilege. In a letter to Charles Yancey in 1816, he wrote, "If a nation expects to be ignorant and free, it expects what never was and never will be." For Thomas Jefferson, freedom and ignorance could never coexist. Education was not about personal success. It was a civic duty, and still should be. To preserve our freedom, we must defend truth, invest in education, and fight against misinformation instead of accepting what the media feeds to us. The third president supported the free press, believing it was vital for holding the government accountable and spreading knowledge. In a world full of misinformation, Jefferson's emphasis on the truth, literacy, and open debate remains deeply relevant. News should not be censored, media should not be censored, and freedom of speech must continue to thrive. For Thomas Jefferson, liberty required more than just good laws. He believed that liberty could only be preserved if citizens actively participated in the democratic process by voting, questioning power, and staying involved in political life, or in public life. In 1798, he wrote a letter to William Smith that said, "Every generation needs a new revolution, and that the tree of liberty must be refreshed from time to time with the blood of patriots and tyrants. It's its natural manure." The second half of which is greatly debated. While some misuse the quote to justify a violent revolution, Jefferson was simply emphasizing that citizens should question authority and hold their leaders accountable because complacency leads to tyranny. Jefferson didn't view democracy as something to be maintained from the sidelines. He knew that each generation would have to take responsibility to renew freedom. Sometimes this meant hard choices, protesting, and renewal. Jefferson stressed what he called Republican virtue. The idea is that citizens must put the public good above personal gains when it comes to civic duties. That meant and still means voting for what benefits the country as a whole, and not blindly following leaders, participating regularly and staying informed, and protecting the rights for future generations. Jefferson favored decentralized local government because it made direct participation more possible. He believed that in smaller communities, more people would feel that their voices mattered. They would participate more easily in town meetings and debates, and they would know their leaders personally. He once proposed that Virginia be divided into wards so small that every citizen could actively participate in its governing. He truly believed that every voice mattered, or at least hoped that someday it would. Thomas Jefferson was a strong believer in individual rights and limited government. He was a great role model for what a U.S. citizen should be. The lead writer for the Declaration of Independence had a vision for what America should have become. Through his commitment to liberty, his views on slavery and religious freedom, and his vision of active civic participation, he crafted a view that earned us our liberation. He defended the freedom and the equality of the people. He knew that liberty was not guaranteed, but it was earned. He wanted us to know that we have a role to play in our government. And today, as we face new challenges like political division, misinformation, and threats to civil rights, his vision remains relevant. As this speech comes to an end, I would like to thank everyone for their time and engagement. But I would also like to leave you with this. In regards to the words of our former president, Thomas Jefferson, what he wrote in the opening paragraph of the Declaration of Independence, take a moment to consider how he'd feel about the current state of our nation. I'd like to read you the opening paragraph. When in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them to one another, and to assume among the power of the earth the separate and equal stations to which laws of nature and nature's God entitle them, decent respect to the opinions of man requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to separation. When it could be put into words the wrongs that the government has done upon its people, sometimes people have to break away from that government, especially when their government no longer respects their rights. Thomas Jefferson knew that governments are not untouchable, they're replaceable. Thank you and happy Independence Day.